Hi, my name is Jordan Quintero, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with my hands. We're doing video today. This is my artwork behind me, and we're in this really beautiful art studio in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada in this little town called Colfax. And my babe, Ashley Foreman, and I are doing a long format YouTube video about my artwork. So hope you enjoy. Just hang on to it. So my artwork is inspired primarily at the moment, and I've gone through many different areas of investigation through the years, but right now I'm really focusing on nature, the experience of nature, the ideas around what the natural is, how we relate to it as individuals and as a culture and a species and a society. And then that also segues into the other big thing, which is sort of history and culture and art history in general. And I've always been really fascinated by art and by the way people interpret and express their feelings about the natural world and about their lives. And so right now I have these sort of two formal ideas that are playing off of each other, and one is the landscape, and these are all from my own experiences in landscape, and photographs and cell phone captures that I've taken while adventuring around California, specifically the Sierra Nevada mountains this last year, and then sort of ancient archaeological, cultural, anthropological artifacts. So I've been working a lot with Native American, North American, and Mexican cultural artifacts, and looking at their geometric motifs and their artwork, and kind of pulling from that to interact with the forms that I'm finding in nature. So my process has been fairly controlled since I've been able to have the studio, and that's such a big part of it is the space. And so I kind of go around and I do a lot of fact-finding, collecting, image mining, you might call it, where I'm taking photographs and I'm making sketches, and I'm just living and experiencing the world. And like I said, I was in nature a lot last year in the summer. It was really a goal of mine to really kind of immerse myself into that. So I have a whole huge stockpile of images. And then when I start to get into the studio, I will go through those images and find things that are interesting to me and start to workshop them. And I'll workshop them through digital media and make studies on the iPad and Procreate, or and then often we'll work from the screen and onto paper, work in dry media, and then from there start to workshop into the oil paint. The oil paint is where I'm trying to get to because it's the most beautiful to me, and it's the neatest material, and but it's also the most resource intensive. So the process is always anchored in drawing and photography, but it works towards painting as sort of kind of the arc that it takes. So color for me is really interesting at the moment. It's sort of when I kind of ask myself, why not just take photographs? Why paint these photographs? It becomes about the material, and the material becomes about the color, and just the special and kind of unforeseen and magical things that can happen when you're working in oil paint and you're playing with color and you're taking the time to really mix palettes and work stuff through. And so obviously the source inspiration comes from the atmosphere, of the mountains, of but I'm really trying to find the feelings. I'm really trying to find those special combinations of colors that really can convey senses of mystery, of excitement, of loneliness and wandering, and the interior emotional space that kind of comes up with the images for me, and gives it a sense of sort of specialness, you might say. There's a saturation that happens, and there's a simplification that happens, and I'm just looking for those interesting harmonious moments that take it from kind of real to maybe surreal or super real, something like that. So my style has always sort of been about the negotiations between the interior experience of being alive, of being a person, and the outside world. So there's always been sort of an abstract representational dialogue that goes on in my work. I'm trying to figure out what is real, and that's always constituted by both the inner and the outer worlds. And so I find certain patterns, certain repetitive kind of mark-making elements have been consistent throughout my work, and those have sort of taken on their own life and developed. And there's always sort of reference points to these abstract motifs. And then there's also the images and the moments from life, whether or not they be drawn, you know, actually from life or from reproductions. But there's that idea of memory and narrative, and wanting to have those two things in dialogue and try to create spaces that are kind of magical and kind of can convey that sense of adventure that I get when I think about life and where it's taken me and where it kind of takes all of us. So there's that need to try to combine the inner and the outer worlds, and I think that's where a lot of my stylistic decisions come from. So I think that at the moment, what I'm really interested in is simplifying and clarifying what's going on in the images. I feel like I get really enamored with the mark making process and with the feeling and the kinetic stuff. So there's a lot more busyness, I think, in my earlier work. And what I'm trying to do is kind of pull that back and let things settle in and be quiet. So I'm trying to work quickly. I'm trying to find really effective and beautiful shapes and color combinations, and trying to just clarify and bring back sort of the obsessive mark making, which is still important. There's no way to get around that. But I think that it's trying to move towards sort of a cleaner, fresher, more direct approach. So I'm trying to work kind of small at the moment and sort of just cycle through things and just let things be done and do the next thing, and sort of just generate a lot of new work because I'm excited about what's going on right now. So the work that I made 2019 to 22-ish, when I was in the Central Coast, I had a cool studio and business going down there, and I was working through the landscape, and I sort of the same process, workshopping images from life, cell phone captures or digital photographs, and kind of developing landscape paintings, basically, for lack of a better word, out of them. And I was working on wood panel, and I really love the wood grain, I love the material, and that's something that goes back 10 or 15 years. Before I was an architect, I was a carpenter, so I was always using materials from job sites in the studio to just sort of streamline things and make the process go. And I love the material. So the palette was really around those wood tones, those sort of muted earth tones, and there's a complement with blue. So that played off of each other a lot. And it was really trying, more or less successfully, to capture the light that's on the Central Coast, the Mediterranean light, that bright blue, and against the ochre hills and the olives of the chaparral, and then the dark, grays and greens that you find in the shadows. And so now that I'm in a different environment, things are more Nordic. Things are more saturated. The darks are darker greens. They're pine forest. They're, those really explosive sunsets off the pink granite. And so that's kind of working in to the new work, because that's the subject matter. And so I'm really having a good time and finding some really beautiful combinations, just sort of playing through making lots of work right now. So I've often said that for me, painting and creativity and making art is it's a spiritual practice for me. It's very healing. It's very calming. It's very good for the nervous system, and there's something that's very celebratory or even ecstatic, I think, in expressing yourself. And there's something about being creative that is at its root giving thanks for being alive, and trying to live to the fullest and to the best of your ability to create something beautiful and share it with people. So I think that is why I make it, and I would hope that when I'm successful and I create something that somebody else finds very beautiful and wants to live with, that they have a similar sense of the joy of being alive, of the significance of their life, of the importance of really enjoying it and bringing that joyful, celebratory attitude, which doesn't negate the difficulties and the struggles. In fact, that's usually where most of the best, most poignant work comes from. It's how you can define joy, is through the suffering, I think. So there's just that sense of appreciation, I think, for life that I feel is what I'm trying to express with my work, and that's what I would hope it helps the viewer, the collector, to feel when they look at it, is just kind of that they're glad to be alive, that they're glad to be here doing their thing, whatever it is, and that they feel that basically, connected to the world. So I do accept and enjoy making commission artwork for people. I do graphic design. I design buildings for people. I enjoy creating things sort of across mediums. It doesn't really matter to me. I like making music. So I'm a jobber. If people want work, I love it when they get a hold of me and we figure out what their budget is and what their space is and what they're passionate about. And that's a very gratifying, very rewarding process to make custom artwork for people is a great thing. So definitely, if you're interested in my style or what I've been working on and you'd like something specific, reach out and let me know. So I am all over the internet. It's a strange thing. It's such a saturated place, but yeah, I have an Instagram. I have a Facebook page. I have a Facebook profile. I have a website that is a really nice archive of all my work, and that's just my name.com, jordanquintero.com. And if you're curious how you're supposed to say it, it's Quintero, but we're in the Norte Americano, so we're going to go ahead and just go Quintero. But it's Quintero. JordanQuintero.com. I do also put out a lot of content on Instagram. I just make it part of the process. So I'm in here doing videos of time lapses and just different little close-ups and little musings. And so if you're interested in seeing what's going on in here and what I've got available, Instagram's a great way if you to follow and like and keep an eye on what's going on. So the journey with making art for me, it was interesting. I when I was a little guy, I drew all the time. I was really into drawing. My mom always had a crafts table with materials, and we were always doing creative art projects. And then getting into junior high and high school, it wasn't really the cool thing to do. I got a lot more into music and playing sports. I played football and baseball and did surfing. And so I just, I've always been very active, but music was much more about my adolescent vibe. And writing. I wanted to be a writer when I was in high school. And then my first semester of junior college at Cuesta College in San Luis Obispo, I enrolled in a figure painting class, and it needed prereqs. I shouldn't have even been able to register, but the internet let me in. And the first day of class, we worked from a live model, and we just did these black and white charcoal and gesso quick studies, and I loved it. I had a great time, and I had a natural facility with the figure since I'd drawn comic books when I was a kid in elementary school for years, and I had a great time. And the teacher liked my work, and she said, how long have you been painting? And I said, I've never painted before. And she said, hang on. And she went in the back room, and she came out, and she had a bag of paint, and there was a little roll of brushes in it and a jar to clean your brushes with. And she said, the school gave me $100 to give somebody a scholarship, and I want you to have this paint. And so I had paint. And I did, at that point, I wasn't thinking be an artist, be a painter at all. I just was like, oh, cool, thanks for the paint. I finished the class. And I was just doing general ed, and I was just trying to figure out who I was. And as it turns out, dealing with a bunch of trauma I didn't even really have a vocabulary or framework for. But I was just cruising, being a hippie kid in California. But I had this paint, and I kept painting. I would just find pieces of cardboard, notebooks, canvases, whatever, and I just kept painting. It just was something that I would do it for fun with my friends, and just kept doing it and kept doing it. I started showing my work and selling my work, and then when it sort of came time to pick a major and should transfer, I was doing a semester abroad in the south of Spain at the time, and art was a very much bigger part of the culture there. There were galleries everywhere. You would meet people that were painters or sculptors, and people didn't. It wasn't like a condescending or like oh, that's cute. It was like being a professional. People really respected the arts. And it just made me think that was a real thing. So it just I was painting cityscapes there and selling them, and I thought, what the hell? I really enjoy this. I'll pursue this as my education. And so I went to UC Santa Cruz and got a painting degree. And I always worked construction to pay the bills. And they kind of dovetailed, and when I got out, people said, what are you going to do with your art degree? And I said, I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be a painter. And I've always maintained a studio. I've always shown my work, and I've tried to be a professional for the last 20 years. So I'm still doubling down on it and making a bunch of paintings, having a good time doing it. So the personal mental health and spiritual dimension of the creative process and engaging with it in a serious and dedicated way, it doesn't really matter the medium. For me, painting is like dance. It's very kinetic. There's a lot of movement. It involves the body. And in a way that helps to quiet the mind. And I think that is really kind of the root of the therapeutic effect of working a creative process, is to kind of get the chatter to die down and to get into a rhythm. And I do feel like when I'm in the zone painting and I've got my palette and I'm really just making moves that are pleasing and fun and good, it's a lot like surfing. It's a lot like riding a bicycle. It's a lot like, working out or like dancing or any other sort of joyful creative act. But really, there's an overlap with the physicality of other things. But there's also, in that quieting of the mind, there's like these biorhythms, I think, that happen that have really lasting, very therapeutic, beneficial effects for the mind. And I have epilepsy, and I didn't know my whole life, but it was undiagnosed, and then I found out about 8 years ago that I have seizures, partial onset seizures in the temporal lobe of my brain that feel like deja vu, but like the most intense kind of earth-shattering deja vu you've ever had. It's very psychedelic. It's like a DMT type experience, like a psychedelic, flood dose of something, and they only last about 20 seconds. And I don't lose consciousness, but they are sort of unnerving, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff there. But definitely, how it ties into the creative process is probably twofold. One of the things is that these emotions and this experience is so intense and profound, and it'll happen when I'm in the middle of a business meeting, or I'm walking the dog, or I'm painting, or whatever, just mundane tasks. So it does sort of imbue just your day-to-day activity with this sort of, kind of angel singing holiness, I guess, for lack of a better word. So there's something in that sentiment that makes you want to express yourself and use your life to the fullest. I think that's sort of the religious impulse in humanity. But there's also a lot of terror that goes with it, and there's a lot of cortisol and adrenaline that spikes up, and you're like, oh my God, what the f is going on right now? And so there's also this need to move and to process. And I've always been a very voracious reader and wide thinker, and I pay attention to politics and current events, and I know a lot of the darkness that's out there is present and serious. And so for me, it really is a way to tap into that joyful, rhythmic, kind of natural state that I know it, just like working out, just like eating a healthy diet, and all these other things, and getting into a good sleep rhythm and all these things that, the science says this is how you have a healthy organism. I know that creating in a regular, dedicated way, and having those moments to just really focus and be present, be totally present. There's a lot of kind of crossover with meditation, I think, and it has that same sort of soothing effect, very therapeutic, very calming. And when I come out of the studio, I feel refreshed, I feel joyful and grateful, and I guess like that's what I would hope is in the work too. I guess going back to the earlier question about what do I want the collectors or the people that live with the work or to get out of it. It's like if they could get a piece of the well-being that it created in me and making it, that would be wonderful. Why haven't I quit making art? Good question. I feel at a certain point you're kind of pot committed. I think when I was in my 20s and I was stubbornly, it was sort of a rebellion. Fuck you, I'm going to be an artist, sort of thing. Everyone was like, God, you could get a contract, you could do all these things, why? And art, really, art? And I just dug my heels in. I just really wanted to do it. I wanted to do life on my terms. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to make my mark on the world. And I just knew how important it was for me to have this creative practice. And And through the school of hard knocks, you sort of learn that you have to build a business around it in a certain sense, and create logistical framework for it to occur. And honestly, it's afforded me a really neat life. I've traveled a lot because of it. I've collaborated doing events, curating, promoting. I stayed involved with music for many, many, many years, through the visual art and the crossover there. And it just met really interesting, cool people. And my collectors have been great. So many people on my mailing list they've been with me now for 15, 20 years, and they give a shit, and they buy work, but they understand, and they want to see the journey, and it's neat to have that connection. And it's just become part of who I am, just a big part of how I operate in the world. And it creates connections and opportunities to do all sorts of different cool things. I've produced a art gallery and music festival in Costa Rica because of artwork. I've rented a studio in Colfax, California, and joined the local nonprofit board of directors to have a cool studio and make artwork in about the mountains. And I don't know what the hell. For me, there's sort of part of it that's kind of anti-capitalist too. That's kind of fuck you. Like, I'm going to make something that is non-exploitative, I guess. I think that there's part of me that went through when I was a kid, looking at all the different columns. Okay, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you do this? And there was always so much collateral damage in the late capitalist system. It's a really dog eat dog thing out there. And it's like you're when you make work and give it create value, it's like you're just using yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I use recycled materials. Like, the inputs are pretty minimal. It's just what comes through my senses and goes through my soul. And there's something like really magical about creating value just out of your own guts, like just out of your own, just make it up. I remember my truck broke down when I had my studio in Oakland, and I was scrambling for cash, and I did open studios, and somebody came in and they bought the big major piece. And I could buy a truck, and I bought a truck, and my buddy said, "You painted a truck," and it's real, And so there is something that's just so fun. There's a childlike exuberance when it goes well, and you're selling work and you're having fun and getting your stuff out there. The fact that you just made it up and made it happen it's a neat thing. So the business side of it, and getting collectors, and having that connection with people, and I have done it all over the world, and there's a lot of different scenarios in which it occurs and stuff. There's so much work that's out there that when I was a kid, didn't keep track of people or whatever, and that's an interesting thing, to think that your art is out in the world somewhere that you don't even know. And but a lot of people, as I mentioned, they kind of sign up. They sign up for the mailing list, they buy a piece, and they sort of stay involved. And they kind of become like family after a while. It's really interesting. It's such a personal product. It's so tied to your events in your life, your physical circumstances, to your emotional experiences. That's all in there. And but there's something really magical about once you kind of release it and it goes to someone else and it becomes part of their personal experience. And so there's this weird kind of mind melding, that happens with your collectors, where you're sort of psychically kind of seeded all over the place. And it's a neat thing, and then people will come to you and they'll say, I have a really important, commission idea that I need to do, or somebody, I'm getting married, or whatever. Like, it's sort of a significant, it can be, the smaller stuff is not quite as big of a commitment, but the bigger pieces, they're a commitment. It's kind of a bigger decision for people, and it's really an honor, I think, is the word. I'm honored to be collected by so many people, and so many people are so neat. You get to know them, and they run businesses, or they're therapists, or they do cool things with their lives, and they're trying to help people, and they're really sweet and they're kind, and just like that interpersonal connection that happens when you run a small business, regardless of what it is, but really when it's something that you're sort of helping people create meaning and joy and celebration and color and personality. It's sort of like how they express themselves. They add their energy to the piece by collecting it, and then it's almost like a collaboration at that point. It's a really gratifying, very cool thing to participate in. Well, so a lot of your collectors when you get going are people um, and in terms of creating meaning, kind of like having value for people, um, and like the weird mystical cosmic sort of thing that can happen. I mean, they all sort of have that cosmic connection. I think that's why people pull the trigger and get something. It helps them create meaning. But the one that springs to mind when you ask me about, that sort of connection is actually one that my brother brought from me, and it is a really strong piece. It had sort of my early kind of street art, kind of abstract mark making in it, and a really powerful figure. And it was when I was sort of doing the trees. I went through a whole phase of anthropomorphic trees, and so it was one of the better pieces that came out of that period, if not the best one. And he really, really wanted it, and it was called Atlas, and the figure was sourced from these old juniper trees that grew around Lake Merritt. I was living in Oakland, and it was just so gnarled and twisted, and you could tell it just really been sort of abused and beat to hell. But it was just, there was so much strength in it, and there was so much power. And so the painting was called Atlas, and my brother really wanted it, and he's chosen a very strenuous road in his life, and he's held up a lot of responsibility, and I really admire him, and I really respect him, and I know that he has a great depth of feeling and a lot of soul, and that he saw in that painting himself and me and our family and our people and the struggle that we've had to go through to survive and to thrive, and that has hopefully given him some strength through the years, and he's doing good, and yeah, that's a really meaningful piece in a cool place that I'm glad is there.
how it does.